Well, hi. I'd like to welcome you to my exhibition at the Visual Arts Center of New Jersey. It's called Corona Dreams, and it will be beginning December 5th and continuing till January 24th in Summit, New Jersey. Now, when I first was invited to have this show, I had expected that we'd be having a gala reception, maybe Saturday evening, on when the first show opened. I envisioned we'd be serving champagne, all those mini past hors d'oeuvres that we all love. You know, those little mini desserts, the best part of any party. I'd come up, I'd talk to you, I'd give you hugs and kisses, and we'd have a wonderful time, and we'd see this show, which I'm proud to have. And I would be glad to see you enjoying it with me. But instead, each one of you got this little postcard, and the postcard invited you to a YouTube link that you may see at your own leisure. Instead of Zooming, where we all had to show up in our little boxes, this gives you the opportunity to leave whenever you feel like it. You can turn it on and you can turn it off, and I'll never know. And all of that is quite fine with me. I'm happy to include you in my list of friends that I wish we could be together, but at least I'm thrilled that you have gotten this far in the YouTube video. Nothing comes from nothing. So what I'd like to tell you is this really, in all honesty, is not my first artistic show. This is actually my second. My first one began when I was a teenager, and it was in Newark, New Jersey at the Chancellor Avenue Y, the YMHA it used to be called. And there I used to do Hebrew calligraphy as a teenager, and there was an exhibit of my work, and I was very proud to go to it. And I have a few of the original pieces from that show from when I was much younger and much different looking, but I'd like to share them with you. These were originally sketches for stained glass windows somewhere in the bush, was not consumed. This one is Vayihior, the creation story. The tape no longer sticks, the separation of waters. And the world, the earth was put forth grass. And God said, let there be lights in the firmament. And I guess that was the end. Here's one from Ecclesiastes. This was another one from the original show, Yivarechecha, God bless you and keep you. There was a vast hiatus between the original teenage work and my going back to art classes at the Visual Arts Center. I studied with Pat Sansusi when children finally went to school, and she taught me that pouring was the way to go. And I absolutely loved pouring as a watercolorist and texture. So here's one of the works I made with her as my idea of art released me from the idea of realism, and I went directly into texture, keeping a lot of the biblical ideas, but pouring instead of using a brush. I continued with, as a watercolorist, with Fernando Categ at the Summit Art Center, pouring, and he helped me edit many of these early watercolors. And I've used a variety of Kleenex and toilet paper and pouring through those wonderful supplies. Come on over, I'll show you some more. I still continued with Judaic themes, and here's a Kabbalistic idea of the breaking of the vessels and how goodness was scattered in the world, and how it's a man's job to have to recreate and pick up those pieces, otherwise known as tikkun olam. And I continue to focus on creation issues, the chaos of the first days, The tohu vavohu is what it's called. And it's the pouring technique, and you can see the paint is poured through toilet paper, through tissue paper, and it continues that way. And then I remove those papers later. I also love the idea of using alcohol inks because of how the paint flowed. So this is alcohol ink on Yupo paper. I love to experiment with that because I love the idea of the colors blending. And to me, not only is it mystical, but it reminds me very much of outer space. I feel like I'm at the Hubble telescope when we see this. So this is the background to the show that I want you to see. Because at the next show, and we're going to stop the video for a few seconds while I drive to the art center and show you the actual exhibit and how we progressed in art from here. Thank you. I'll be back. You can stay. I'm going to leave. Well, now we've updated our video. Hope you're still with me, or you've come back. And now we're actually entering the exhibit at Visual Arts in Summit, New Jersey. The show is called Corona Dreams, and I call it Corona Dreams because I did a lot of this work at home in my makeshift studio, otherwise known as the Lego basement. Matt Langley was one of my teachers here. I expanded into using acrylics and canvas. I got a little tired of just the watercolor pouring. But what I learned from painting in acrylics was you can layer the color on the canvas, but pouring through toilet paper and pouring through Kleenex just did not work. So I worked with brushes for a while, but then became a little dissatisfied with that technique, and I began to pour again. So come with me into the exhibit, and I'll show you first one of my first experiments in using the most valuable of all medium during the pandemic. And I actually used paper towels that worked very well. I call this exhibit, obviously, Corona Dreams, but I started doing this in class and experimenting with the abundant supply of paper towels because I'm a very messy painter, needlessly, you can tell that. And I created these in the class here by pouring different colors. I tried it on a white background, I painted over, tried it again, and created a series of trees in the Four Seasons. And I loved how the texture came out with the paper towels. Obviously we have fall, then I had to go on to winter. The cherry trees had many different pours done over them. Each painting usually has about 16 layers of failed paintings beneath them. And finally, we got to spring. I continued doing this technique. And my next set that I experimented with were in a different palette. And this was when Australia was burning and California was burning, and you couldn't stop seeing the flames everywhere. So I call this firewall. And I feel that it reminded me exactly of what happened in Australia and happened in California. And then the art center shut down, and I had to do more work, and I moved into the basement of my home, and I had all these failed other paintings, so I just painted them over. I never liked to lose a wonderful canvas from Michaels, but I wasn't adverse to wasting paint, so I painted over earlier paintings that I had done that I called unsuccessful, and started using different types of material. I call this one the deep. And if you notice, the paper towels don't crinkle as well. because when you had to buy them online, I couldn't get the same quality, or perhaps lack of quality, of paper towels. And of course, I didn't want Bounty written all over them, or all those other things that come on paper towels. So the textural effect is somewhat different. Sometimes as I was working, I'd become very disgusted with what I had done. And after painting, I just ripped off all my paper towels and discovered underneath that it looked even better without my paper towels on top. So I call this one Ghost Shadows. I have many of these. And I'm trying to decide that I like it better with my creation or without my creation on top. Come to some of the others with me now. I always love doing landscapes, and you may not see this as a landscape. I call it Red Sky at Night. I happen to have had 3 similar. I like to work in triptychs, diptychs, because then you can always throw one out. But here, these were failed paintings. I painted over them and started over and poured on these. And I think they were much better than the dead painting that was underneath all of these. I came back to the art center occasionally to pay my dues, and just went into the bathroom to get some more of their wonderful paper towels that crinkle better than mine. But I couldn't keep up with the supply. I did these the same way. You can even see remnants of the older painting that was underneath. And I would just continue to pour paint all over. Even though you may think this is wasteful, it is extremely therapeutic when you are released and can live freedom-free from brushes. Because then whatever your feelings are, they can just pour out. And I call this the deep. The whole essence of this show are places where we can go and where we cannot go. And during the pandemic, basically, the dream is all the places I wished I could be or to see. And mostly they're outside. If you come over here, I'll show you some more. I was always a big traveler, for those of you that know. And here's one series that I made of Arctic ice. Now, Arctic ice, obviously, is blue. It doesn't really look like this, but in Greenland, but is the memory of the icebergs that I have seen, the glaciers that I have seen. And they didn't look exactly like this, but when you remember things, they always come out much more vivid in memory than they do in person. And now you can notice I have found a little different kind of paper toweling. It has little dots on it. And I have even discovered some tissue paper actually will adhere at this time. So I'm still in the moment and still experimenting with my wide variety of paper products. I also am fascinated by water, and that has been between water and sky. I love to think of different images. I used to swim when we could go into indoor swimming pools, do exercise that way. So I call this one a swimming reflection of swimming in the deep. This one I call Under the Sea, and if anybody who's been scuba diving or snorkeling will recognize that one. I call this one Lily Pads. This one barely made it into the show, but it seemed to go with the color palette of the others, and also thematically. And here's another one I call Kelp Forest. I seem to like blues. I have a lot of trouble with other colors, but blues seem to be the color I have loved the most. So, in conclusion, I would say at 74, I am in the early stages of my new career, And I would say it's all about the process of becoming. And who knows where I can go from this once my paper towel paper is exhausted. I do not know what I'll do, but I have a lot of canvases waiting in my basement. Where I'm working now is my studio, replacing the Lego sculptures of my grandchildren. And who knows what the future will bring. Thank you very much for coming. I miss you. Hope we'll get together soon.